India, China.
Hello and welcome viewers, I am Pia and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. The deadly earthquake in Afghanistan has claimed at least 1,132 lives, with more than 3,000 people now injured. While rescue efforts continue, over 8,000 homes remain destroyed in the disaster-hit region. North Korea's Kim Jong-un has arrived in Beijing and is all set to attend China's Grand Military Parade. This is remarkably Kim's first visit to Beijing in 6 years. Russian President Vladimir Putin, who is already in China, is also going to attend the parade. However, there are no reports of a scheduled trilateral. Russian President Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping have held bilateral talks in Beijing earlier today. The two leaders have reaffirmed their strategic ties. Putin has stated that close communication reflects the strategic nature of Russia-China relations, especially amidst the ongoing global conflict. That is not all. There's been a significant deal as far as energy cooperation and enhancing this is concerned. US President Donald Trump has slammed Israel over its offensive in Gaza. He has stated that Israel may be winning the war in Gaza, but it is losing in the world of public relations. This comes as Israel is losing support globally, with a number of Western countries agreeing to recognize the Palestinian state at the UNGA. Ukrainian drones have struck Russia's Rostov-on-Don region. Russia's defense ministry has stated that 3 people have been injured while more than 300 residents have been evacuated. The strikes reportedly targeted residential buildings and apartments. At least 20 people have been reported missing following violent protests across Indonesia over the past week. The protests have resulted in the loss of 6 lives. Over 1,240 people have meanwhile been arrested since the 25th of August. India's Trade and Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal has stated that the country is in talks with the United States for a bilateral trade agreement. This comes as Washington doubles down on its decision to slap 50% tariffs on goods from India as a punitive measure for New Delhi's continued import of Russian oil. Vietnam has celebrated its 80th Independence Day with its biggest military parade in decades. Vietnam cast handouts to 100 million citizens and the release of nearly 14,000 prisoners. Communist Party chief To Lam has vowed to defend the nation's sovereignty down to every sacred inch of land. Well, viewers, those are the headlines and our top focus. The terrible tragedy that has taken place in Afghanistan after the deadly 6.0 magnitude earthquake. This has claimed at least 1,132 lives, and the death toll is likely to rise even further. This is information as per the Afghan Red Crescent Society. More than 3,000 people have been injured and over 8,000 houses have been destroyed. The quake hit at around 11:47 p.m. local time on Sunday, with its epicenter about 27 kilometers away from Jalalabad, the country's 5th largest city in the eastern Nangarhar province. According to reports, hundreds are still buried under the rubble and rescue efforts are underway, especially as the 72-hour crucial window is now appearing to end. Meanwhile, an Afghan official reportedly stated that their priority is to rescue those who are still stuck. However, rescue teams are facing obstructions in reaching out, especially to remote areas, since the roads have been blocked. We've learned that several countries across the world have extended a helping hand. India has already dispatched relief materials to Afghanistan, with 1,000 family tents sent to Kabul and 15 tons of food materials moved to Kunar from Kabul by the Indian mission over there. The United Nations has also pledged support for the Afghan people, and a helping hand has already been extended by China and the United Kingdom as well. With us on the broadcast is Vibhuti Rai. He's a geologist joining us from Lucknow in India. Thank you for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World. Afghanistan is prone to deadly earthquakes, particularly in the Hindu Kush mountain range, where the tectonic plates, the Indian and Eurasian tectonic plates meet. We've seen a slew of seismic activity over there, not just the 6.0 magnitude quake. There was a 5.6 magnitude quake that hit on the 27th of August. Before that, a 5.2 quake struck on the 19th of August. A 5.5 quake hit on the 29th of June, and a 5.7 earthquake struck the region on the 10th of May. Similar such earthquakes were also recorded on the 16th and the 19th of April. Is this kind of frequent seismic activity normal in the region or a cause of concern?
Yeah, you see, it's the region entirely is tectonically activated because in the last three and a half months, we have been observing through these tremors and smaller scale earthquakes. The present one is very close to a densely populated township of Jalalabad, and that's the reason why so many casualties have taken place. The area near Kunar is that's one of the provinces, the eastern part of Afghanistan, bordered with Pakistan, and there lies a number of large fault lines which are running northeast, southwest. We have quite a few rivers along these fault lines. So what is actually happening, as I understand, is that a lot of erosion has taken place in the last few months, ever since the onset of monsoon in the region, especially in the Himalayan and related adjacent terrains. And this has offloaded a lot of sediments from one area to another that has perhaps been responsible for the activation of seismic activity in the region. I think this should be one of the largest earthquakes because as we are seeing the trend in the last few months, earthquake of magnitude 5 and more has been taking place in the nearby areas. So the area is susceptible to a lot of earthquakes because that's one of the border lines between the Indian plate and the Eurasian plate. So, but in the past, since they were in remotely located areas, so casualties were less. But Jalalabad being one of the largest cities of Afghanistan, and the earthquake epicenter is very close to it, about 25 kilometers, as you have said. So the casualties are more, and I've seen some pictures and videos. The entire villages have been fallen down, and a lot of people are still buried. There might be children and old people which are under the rubble. So I think United Nations and many other countries like India and China, they've already sent the aid in the form of helping out the Afghani people. And I think the tremors should come down now because a major earthquake has already taken shape.
All right, sir. With that, I'd like to thank you for joining us live today, sharing your perspective and providing some insight as to how exactly the seismic activity in the region is impacting the lives of the people over there. Meanwhile, we're shifting focus towards what's happening in China. Now, according to a South Korean lawmaker who has cited an assessment from the country's spy agency, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is seeking to restore closer ties with China and secure economic support. This comes as the North Korean leader is in Beijing to mark the World War II anniversary. His train bearing North Korean flags and markings linked to him has reportedly crossed into Beijing. The South Korean lawmaker has stated that Kim Jong-un is likely to stand alongside Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin on the Xiamen rostrum during the military parade, reviving, I beg your pardon, the optics of a Cold War era triangular alliance. South Korea's intelligence agency also anticipates a North Korea-China summit and a potential meeting between Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin. Let's take a closer look at what the South Korean lawmaker has said.
9월 3일 열병식에서 시진핑, 푸틴과 나란히 천안문 성루에 서서 냉전기 삼각연대 구도를 재현하는 한편 북중 정상회담 개최는 물론 북러 정상 간의 만남도 이루어질 것으로 국정원은 전망하고 있습니다. 첫 번째로 북중 관계 복원을 통한 대외 운신폭을 확대한다. 두 번째는 중국의 경제적 지원을 견인하고 체제 활로를 모색한다. 이번 방중은 김정은의 가자외교 데뷔전으로 북중러 연대 옵틱을 과시하기 위한 파격 행보로서 향후 과감한 대내외 조치에 나설 소지가 있는 것으로 분석하고 있습니다.
Joining us on the broadcast is Mr. Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical commentator joining NewsX World from London. Thank you for taking out time speaking to us. What's interesting is that this attempt by Kim Jong-un to mend a recent strain, if one could say, with ties with China follows the recently concluded Ulchi Freedom Shield exercises between the US and South Korea. We've seen South Korean President Lee Jae-myung continuing to offer an olive branch, something which has repeatedly been rebuffed by North Korea, that has issued threats of rapid expansion of nuclear weapons. So what do you expect from Kim Jong-un's visit, and what next for the Korean Peninsula as such?
Yeah, good to be with you again. Well, he has crossed over, as you said, via his train, and then he is going to try and, as you said, mend fences. The Trump administration and also the South Korean leader are really, as you mentioned, have really been seeking to sit down and have a conversation. We remember in President Trump's first administration, DJT-1, where the fact that he crossed over the border and he went and had a little conversation with Kim Jong, with Rocket Boy at the time, and we remember the rest of the world thinking Donald J. Trump is going to start Third World War, bloody blah. No, he did. No, he did not. We note the ties, note the axis, note the fact that it's been commentated on, of course, that North Korea has been supplying soldiers for Russia in their invasion of Ukraine. And the reason why I say it, look at how all this axis is being built. There is saber rattling going on, and as we were talking yesterday with one of your great guests from Taiwan, we've got to remember the military exercises that are going on there. So let's put it in this perspective. North Korea by no means is any kind of democratic state whatsoever. It's the ideology, extreme Marxism, control, tyranny, all rolled into one. With China over the last couple of days mentioning democracy in China in the same sentence is something that we need to remember, because I tried to get over that, trying to get over that one. It is about an axis that is building, as we have said over the last couple of days, to then challenge they want a multipolar world, and they are really beginning. China wants to be number one. They are beginning to flex their muscles again, and people need to keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on the relationship between Iran, what Iran then supplies to Russia. We then look at what Iran does with its economy by building up this axis against Israel, going for a nuclear bomb. Why is all this relevant? Is this all relevant because of the relationships that these people have in trying to build this alliance that goes then breaks out, as we've said over the last day, from that Eurasia group then to then be able to challenge the Western countries, to then challenge the hegemony of that, to challenge NATO, to challenge the G7, etc. And they have already done that, because there is a huge propaganda war going on within Western nations, which against against the actions of that they perceive that Israel is doing in Gaza. It is all part of that to change people's thinking, Pia.
I request you to stay on with us. We're tracking further developments. You've been referring to Taiwan, and there's news coming in regarding that. Tensions are once again rising across the Taiwan Strait as Beijing is preparing a massive military parade to mark the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. Taiwan has sharply criticized this display, accusing China of spending the equivalent of 2% of its defense budget, more than 36 billion yuan or $5 billion to project military power and quote-unquote rewrite history. Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council has stated that Beijing was falsely claiming credit for wartime victories fought largely by the Republic of China, whose government later fled to Taiwan after the Civil War. Remember, it was the Republic of China and its representative who had signed the Cairo Agreement in 1936. Former Pentagon official Tony Hu has told reporters that while China is showcasing new unmanned systems and advanced hardware, its real test lies in tactics, strategies, and operator capability, where it still lags behind. Beijing's parade is aimed at intimidating Taiwan and deterring U.S. intervention, is what he has claimed. He's also stated that this is fueling nationalism in Xi's home turf. Let's in fact take a look at what he said.
A psychological warfare tool. It's an opportunity for China to showcase many of their new things. They're new, but based on our operational research, it's not necessarily proven. They will demonstrate many big things, many unmanned systems and stuff, but once again, they're not really proven. I suspect the primary audience is Taiwan. They really hope Taiwan gets intimidated and surrender without a fight. And they also want to intimidate the United States from coming to help Taiwan. And certainly they want to incite the kind of national pride within their own country by saying, we have all this big new stuff. And boy, we can march so well.
我们也感觉到非常的好奇哦，就是说花费这么大的这个巨额的数目来举办一场阅兵哦，那今天9月1号正好是中国实施强制社保的日子哦，那有很多的这个基层的这个中小企业啦，甚至是劳工哦，缴不起这个保费，那他们愿意花费超过1500亿台币来举办一场军演，但是却忽略掉现在中国内部经济、还有劳工、还有社会这些问题哦。我也不晓得这个中国的人民碰到这样的情况，心里会作何感？
All right, I'd like to rope in Mr. Sutherland back into the discussion. It has been 80 years since the Second World War ended. However, China and Taiwan continue a narrative battle over who did what during the deadly war. And I'd like to correct one claim I had made earlier. It was not 1936, it was 1943 when US President Franklin Roosevelt, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill and China's Republican leader Chiang Kai-shek had signed the Cairo Declaration. It seems that the Taiwanese and the CCP are still fighting to date to claim credit for this victory. So do you see this parade as an attempt by Xi Jinping to popularize the CCP's narrative?
I think it's rather interesting that you raise some very, very important history. We have to go back to San Chao-chek. We have to go back to Mao. We have to go back to the machinations that were going on within the U.S. State Department at that time, because this has been going on for a long time. If people then want to have an ideology of worldwide communism, which is continuing to unfold, then we need to pay attention to the past to realize where we are at now. I think the report that you just played with very important words from America in regard to saber rattling, I alluded to that in our first section, is look at all our new weapons, wanting Taiwan to then surrender. As many of us are aware, there's water there that at times is very, very difficult to then cross, and ideally I think it's either April or October, but they have been building these sort of atolls that China are doing to be able to get closer and closer. And that piece was right in regard to intimidation, and then in regard to intimidating the Americans to not get in. Many of us have to go back and read history. We then have to see the manipulation that's gone on by China. If you then look up the second administration of the Clinton administration and see how much money they were then putting into that campaign, this then opens people's eyes to see that this war has been a very, very long game. The Chinese play a long game. We may, within the West, don't necessarily play that long game, but we need to and prepare for that. The issue, as you said, you're right. It is, I believe, what that gentleman says is absolutely right. It is about intimidation, and then if they want the Taiwanese to then just accept, surrender, and say yes, okay, that's fine. But to spend all this money to then have a big military parade, to then have North Korea there, to then have the Russian leader Putin, it all plays into this, which is we will flex our muscles. We will show what the military hardware we have, and if we have to use it, then we do. There is talk out there that the Chinese have said that by 2027 is when they wish to then, by then, have taken Taiwan, if not before. So we have to be very, very alert to this and the machinations of going on. That's why all of the talk of the SCO, etc. That's why, and paying attention to this. That's why it's very, very important. We come back to what we've discussed over the last day or so, which is about the alliances, Pia, that people are working through. Pia.
Mr. Sutherland, I'd like to thank you for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World as we track these crucial developments. Viewers, now we are shifting our focus to Mexico, where newly elected Supreme Court justices were officially sworn in during a Senate ceremony. For the first time, these justices were chosen by public vote rather than presidential appointment and Senate approval. Earlier, the judges had received the indigenous staff of command, symbolizing their new communitarian authority. Chief Justice Hugo Aguilar had pledged to combat corruption and serve the marginalized, promising the 1st June vote would lead to real change. Listen in to what he said.
Por eso, las ministras y ministros que hoy integramos la nueva Suprema Corte de Justicia de la Nación tenemos un mandato claro: sanear el Poder Judicial de la Federación y de las entidades federativas, sanear la Suprema Corte de Justicia de la Nación. Se van a acabar la corrupción, el nepotismo, la deshonestidad.
The Senate event, however, saw disruption from opposition lawmakers who questioned the legitimacy of the election process. Senator Ricardo Anaya warned the court's credibility would rest on its future rulings. The reform marks a key part of President Claudia Sheinbaum's broader push to change the nation's judicial system. Shifting focus to Indonesia, we're learning that at least 8 people have died and another 20 have gone missing following violent protests that have gripped cities across the country over the past week. Protests first erupted on the 25th of August. They were prompted by anger over the perks and benefits given to lawmakers, including a controversial housing alliance. Public outrage escalated when a 21-year-old motorcycle taxi driver was run over by a police vehicle at a protest site. Unrest spread from Jakarta to other cities as well, and Indonesia now sees the most violent protests in decades. President Prabowo Subianto has since scrapped some of the perks given to lawmakers to ease tensions. Meanwhile, the Indonesian police fired tear gas into crowds near the campuses of the Islamic University of Bandung and the Pasundan University to curb the protests. With us on the broadcast is Major General Dr. Rajan Kochar, Senior Strategic and Defense Expert, joining us from New Delhi. Thank you for taking our time speaking to us on NewsX World. The Indonesian people had high hopes from Prabowo Subianto. someone who's had an extensive military as well as political background back when they voted him to power late last year. However, things seem to have spiraled out of control very soon. It's barely been about 10 months since he was sworn in, and protests are already spreading across cities in Indonesia. A lot of the rhetoric that we see that people plaster onto the walls, their spray painting, is the same rhetoric that is used by protesters in the United States of America. What do you make of what is transpiring in the Southeast Asian nation?
Thank you for this very important discussion today. What happens is that in any society or any form of governance, if there is inequality and perception for inequality as far as the elites are concerned, there is bound to be frustration among the people. And when this frustration comes in, it is bound to be ignited by vested elements. It could be outside powers, it could be inside powers who are wanting to derive a political mileage out of it. So, what happens here is that this anger can get transformed with a small incident or a single incident where if in case a protest is on and there is a casualty like this of a rider who was on a motorcycle, if it has happened that way, so that can be a trigger because the anger gets triggered by a very small incident, and we have seen this happening in many such cases within our own country also. Whenever protests are there, it just takes a small spark to ignite the whole thing, and then it spirals out of control. Right now is the most important for the president is that he should be able to placate the anger of the people. He has to bring in certain reforms. He has to carry out an outreach, especially you see these protests are not only limited to students. Uh, uh, there has been a polarization now, and protest diffusion is the first I'm in action I would actually suggest, and it can be built up in two parts, a short term and a long term. In the terms of short term, he needs to address this particular kind of reforms where as you mentioned, housing allowances are inflated and lawmakers are actually getting much more than they actually deserve. So we must bring a kind of a parity. So in the first 72 hours, it is very important that whosoever are missing or where the deaths have been reported, there has to be a proper investigation into it, and efforts have to be made to locate those missing persons because it could be something like enforced disappearances as they happen. Whenever there are the riots, they tend to focus on a set of leaders and to whisk them off. So, this kind of action, I think the government will have to take, and especially the journalists and the researchers who have been found missing, because that could spiral out beyond the reach of the government. Today, we are hearing 20, it could be actually much more. Then all the human rights NGOs must get into touch with the police authorities and try to locate these people who have gone missing. Uh, the next aspect is there has to be a policy which has to be laid out at the shortest time possible for a transparent investigation into this all these incidents which have taken place, so that the people know that the government is well meaning. As you said, the president has just been elected around 10 months back, so it is perceived that he's a popular vote unless those elections were rigged. So in case we presume that president has been elected by the people and he is popular among the people, I think these kind of measures will have to be taken by him and bring the situation under control. Because the first aspect is to bring the situation under control. Whatever the protesters are, whatever they are demanding, those demands have to be listened to. Because unless you do that, I think the situation go out of hand.
Indeed, Major General Kochhar, I'd like to thank you for taking out time, sharing your perspective. As you had stated, the situation had become so dire to the point where the Indonesian president, in fact, cancelled his visit to China. He did not attend the SCO summit. In the meantime, he stayed back, he made concessions, he has agreed to cut the lawmakers' benefits, but whether this will allay the fears in the common people, will the situation improve, that remains to be seen. Well, viewers, due to paucity of time, that's all we have for this bulletin. More news and updates on the other side. Stay tuned on NewsX World.